In tonight's Dorchester segment, we'll look at what's happening with a shopping center on Morrissey Boulevard and plans for development on the Columbia Point Peninsula. To tell us about those stories and what's on the ballot in November is the editor and publisher of the Dorchester Reporter, Bill Forry. Thank you very much for being with us, Bill.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
I want to start with the store on Morrissey Boulevard because this is a location not too picturesque. There have been some ups and downs with the store that was there before, and what's going to be happening in the future?
Yeah, so one of our stories this week is about what people know locally as the National Wholesale Liquidators, which has been closed for about a year now, Chris, on Morrissey Boulevard around the 700 block. It's in what a lot of people call Puritan Plaza, which is the block of stores next to it. So National Wholesale Liquidators went bankrupt. That store was one of the casualties. And so it's been vacant, and there's been a lot of speculation, both in our paper and elsewhere, about what would happen, what could happen, what could replace it. And there's a long laundry list of things that people would love to see there. Anything ranging from an MBTA station that could pop up and service people. It's right along the right-of-way on the Braintree line, and there's not a station in Neponset. To a Trader Joe's is the most frequently chimed in store that people in Dorchester would love to see come, and another whole range of options in between. What our story tells people this week is that, in fact, the management company that controls the property has a tenant that they've agreed to bring in, and it's called Floor and Decor, which is a flooring retailer. It's a national chain. It's a specialty chain, obviously, and they're now on track to open probably sometime later next year. They met with the Clam Point Civic Association on Monday night to kind of lay out the plans for here's what's going to happen. They do intend to do some work to fix up the parking lot, which is quite blighted right now, and the exterior of the store. Now, this store, Dorchester people have been going to for decades, well into the 1950s probably. You have to go back to Orbit and Bradley's and maybe one other that I don't know about. But it's a huge block store, and it's one of these big boxy buildings that has seen better days. It needs at least a resurfacing, and they do plan to do that.
I understand the sentiment about Trader Joe's, but this is much bigger than a Trader Joe's. Plus, you got those two other food stores, Lambert's and Stop and Shop, that are pretty close too.
And there are deed restrictions on this building. It's part of the reason why they can't bring something else in. And so I think people feel a little underwhelmed by this use. But there's a reason for it, I think, from the commercial side, is that there are restrictions on the deed that they really can't do anything about.
You have a meeting coming up about the former Bayside Expo Center development. What's happening with that?
We'll be covering this meeting. It's hosted by Accordia, which is a new company owned by Richard Galvin and Kirk Sykes, and they're the team that was awarded the right to redevelop the Bayside Expo Center grounds, which is a 20-acre site right there in Columbia Point. It's really the front door of UMass and the front door of Dorchester coming from South Boston. So this meeting that will be held on Saturday morning into the afternoon, is the first big public meeting by Accordia to seek public input into what people in Dorchester and South Boston, really the whole city, would like to see happen on that site. There's a whole range of possibilities, from more student housing for UMass to new mixed-use commercial and other amenities, and of course just housing in general that could go there, or office space. So we don't know. It's kind of a blank slate, and the team from Accordia has been upfront about saying, listen, we do have some of our own ideas, but before we put them out there, we want to hear what other people think first, and then arrive at some kind of plan that I believe we would see probably in the new year at this point. It could come sooner, but this meeting on Saturday, it's going to be held at the Boston Teachers Union Hall on Mount Vernon Street, which is adjacent to this Bayside property. They've done a pretty good job, I think, in reaching out to the local civic associations that are established and going and meeting with them individually. And in fact, several of those civic groups, interestingly, are kind of co-signers on this meeting. They're inviting their membership to come. So I expect a big turnout, and we'll see what people have to say.
I imagine any kind of growth in that location is going to put a lot of strain on transportation. So I guess, will people be concerned about that, you think?
No question. It's coming up every time. It's coming up in every project, in every context, but especially this one, because as people know, it's adjacent to Kosciuszko Circle, the rotary there at Columbia Road that is such a snarl. and JFK UMass, the MBTA station, which is quite dated now. It's really kind of a 1980s era construction, and it could stand to use an update as well. So, and then of course pedestrian access, bicycle access, all of the road systems around Columbia Point. All of those things are going to need to be dealt with in a partnership with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, city, and all of these various interests, including Accordia, who they've actually put $25 million aside already to say, we're going to pitch this in at least to help, sort of leverage some public dollars. That's nowhere near what would be needed, of course, but it was a statement in their proposal to win this designation from UMass Building Authority earlier this year, and there are other parties who will have to step up and do the same.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Bill Forry from the Dorchester Reporter. Bill, I also see transportation having an effect along the south, not the southwest, rather the Fairmount-Indigo corridor through Dorchester and Mattapan. Mm-hmm. Some housing stories, tenants facing rent increases. Tell us about what you're covering with that.
Well, one of our reporters, Katie Trajano, last Friday attended a tenant rally at what used to be called the Fairlawn Apartments, and it's been there for decades. It's a 400 plus unit apartment complex right off of Commons Highway near Mattapan Square. And for many years it's been occupied by tenants who are people of color, some lower income. There are a large amount of Section 8 certificates holders who live in the development. It was purchased in 2017 by a new management company, and they've been rebranding it. I can't remember the exact name, but they're using the nearby MBTA station that's just been opened in the last year at Blue Hill Avenue. It's a Fairmount line stop. They've been kind of branding this as a T-accessible residential community, which of course it is. Actually kind of always has been. And along with this rebrand, there's been a hike in rents, and in some cases up to 20% hike in rents. So tenants there, many of them are facing a tough call on whether they can stay or not. And in fact, at this rally, several people were there who are either on the brink of being evicted or fear that they will. And they told stories of tenants who have already left, people that they knew were there for years and years, and then they woke up the next day to see their belongings in the dumpster. So City Life Vita Urbana, which of course we cover often, as do you, organized this event last Friday to call attention to the problem and to issue some demands to this management company that they meet with the tenants, that they agree to some more even-handed annual hikes. No one there is saying that there shouldn't be some adjustment in year-to-year rent, but some of them have been, from the reporting, have been higher than what you'd see normally.
And finally, Bill, election coming up for City Council on November 5th. What should people in Dorchester be paying attention to? Well,
there are two district races that we're watching closely. One is in Dorchester, including District 4, which is the seat held by Andrea Campbell. She has a challenger in November 5th by the name of Jeff Durham. He's a first-time candidate himself, but he's been active in politics in and around Mattapan, Dorchester for a number of years. That's one race, and then in District 5, which includes Mattapan, which we cover Mattapan, that's going to be a showdown between Ricardo Arroyo and Maria Farrell. That's the two local races, and of course we're watching at large closely.
And more details will emerge. So where should people look for that online?
On our site, you can go to .news.com for all the stories that we publish.
Thank you very much for being with us.
You bet. Thank you.
Bill Forry from the Dorchester Reporter.